Member for Saanich Northern Islands.
Mr. Speaker, for weeks we've been hearing the government and opposition fighting about addiction treatment beds. Treatment we desperately need to support recovery of British Columbians. Basically, the debate has been framed around who's worse at letting people die, attempting to score political points off of the trauma of British Columbians. It's theatre. Neither side of this House are taking accountability for their failure to regulate the treatment industry. Private industries are profiting from the drug poisoning crisis. The industry has a vested interest in having clients, and that means more harm, Mr. Speaker. Both sides offer billions, but without setting industry standards, making vulnerable people more vulnerable to potential predators. Addictions treatment and recovery options are greatly needed. However, in British Columbia, there is no standard of care, Mr. Speaker. Additionally, this government doesn't even collect data on the number of beds, who's in them, and how many are needed. One would think that the government would start by understanding the scope of the problem and then ensuring the options they are creating are safe. Mr. Speaker, my question is through you to the Premier. When will he set standards for the treatment industry in British Columbia?
Minister of Health.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the member for his question. As the member will know, previously, under Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Judy Darcy, the government re-regulated an area that had been deregulated, which is recovery houses in BC. It was a significant action that reflected exactly what he's talking about in the community. We have, in this week before the House, a budget that invests unprecedented amounts in treatment, Honourable Speaker, that adds treatment beds in our province, publicly funded treatment beds, supporting groups in the community as well, such as the Canadian Mental Health Association, that do just that. So we have moved on these questions. On the issue of data, you'll see in the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction Service Plan new measurements of data to do exactly what the member is asking. In other words, we have a serious, thoughtful, and frankly, action-oriented response to what is a public health emergency that affects everybody.
Member for Saanich Northern Islands, supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the response from the Minister of Health, and we have seen and heard from the coroner suggesting that anyone can put up a sign and call themselves a treatment centre, Mr. Speaker, and so in the coming weeks we will definitely be asking further questions with respect to the response that the Minister gave in budget estimates and beyond. Yesterday, the Finance Minister was quick to quote Johnny Morris from the Canadian Mental Health Association in BC, but only the good parts, Mr. Speaker. See, I agree with Johnny that the $1 billion investment in mental health and addictions care is a remarkable investment. But the Finance Minister failed to mention that Johnny also raised concerns about the lack of funding for mental illnesses beyond substance use disorder. It appears only $61 million is going to support those illnesses in Budget 2023. I've heard many stories of families desperately seeking care for their loved ones being turned away or discharged less than 24 hours after suicide attempts or self-harm. Our mental health care system is deeply broken. 1 in 5 British Columbians, 900,000 British Columbians will develop a mental illness over their lifetime. Some of those may be related to addictions, but many will not be. Of the $1 billion, there is little for those with schizophrenia, with eating disorders, with dementia. This government currently is failing them, Mr. Speaker. My question, Mr. Speaker, is through you to the Premier. When will he fix the broken system of mental health care for all the people in British Columbia who depend on it?
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, and thank you again to the member for his question. Investment in mental health and addiction since 2017 has gone up more than any other area of healthcare, more than ambulance paramedics, more than surgeries, more than any other, because the system was not in place. I think we can all acknowledge that, was not in place to provide people the care that they need. And so we have taken systematic steps to address that in a number of ways. 45,000 visits to counseling service not funded before. primary care networks that have added more than 200 full-time equivalents to support family doctors and nurse practitioners in providing mental health services, building out a system of care for the very issues the member raises, because he's quite right. There are many people in British Columbia who are not dealing with a dual diagnosis, are not dealing with addictions issues, but are dealing with serious mental health issues. And even mild mental health issues have increased clearly, and we all know this and we all feel this during the pandemic. So he's quite right. We have to build that out in every aspect of care. In child and youth mental health, you've seen it in the Pathway to Hope initiatives that have taken place. In primary care, you've seen it in the major investment in primary care networks. You've seen it in the actions of successive ministers of mental health and addictions in adding counseling services. And we have to continue to do that work. It's essential, I think, in British Columbia, and I think this is where the member and I would entirely agree, that we provide mental health services in the same way that we provide services for a broken leg or a seriously twisted ankle or any other ailment, and that's what we're seeking to do.